The Akebono is a new Japanese ship in Update 1.101 rating Fire. It's a Tier 2 battle rating 3.3 destroyer escort that costs 2,980 Golden Eagles. So, is this ship worth it? Well, first I'm going to cover the history of the Akebono. The Akebono was a destroyer escort that was laid down in 1954, launched in 1955, and commissioned in 1956. It was the only ship of its class and is one of the first ships that Japan designed and built after World War II. The class was succeeded by the Ikazuchi class, which was also a destroyer escort with similar capabilities, but utilized 2 diesel engines instead of 2 steam turbines. The Akebono was decommissioned in 1976. In War Thunder, the Akebono is its refitted loadout from 1958. The primary armament is 2 auto-loading 3-inch 50 caliber cannons. That's right, it has 2 of these cannons at 3.3 while the Asheville has one at 3.7. I'm still not over that thing. These cannons fire at 50 RPM for the first 200 shells and then slow down to 35 RPM afterwards. Their dispersion is initially fine, but gets a bit worse as the gun overheats. The gun takes roughly 30 seconds to overheat and can fire around 27 shells before jamming. Per shot damage is quite good too. Be warned that this cannon does take 10 seconds to swap between shell types, which means that when facing aircraft or heavily armored vessels, you need to swap your ammunition type preemptively. The 3-inch 50 caliber cannon gets 3 shell types: HE, APHE, and HEVT. The HE shell is the best shell for directly damaging most naval targets and should be the majority of any ammunition load. The APHE shells do very little damage, but are required to kill Russian armored riverboats, so it's worth bringing at least 1 set of them for that nightmare situation. The HEVT has less explosive filler than the standard HE, but is useful for taking out aircraft. I would recommend taking mostly HE shells, 1 set per gun of APHE, and 1 or 2 sets per gun of HEVT, depending on how many aircraft you tend to face. For secondary cannons, the Akebono gets a single dual 40mm Bofors turret. It's an overall good anti-air weapon and can also be used as an anti-ship gun in a pinch if the main cannons overheat. It gets 3 belts: Universal, HE, and AP. HE is generally the best choice since the 40mm will mostly be firing at aircraft, however the Universal belt also does the job just fine. The Akebono also gets a variety of depth charges, having both the direct drop kind and the launched kind. Both are equally worthless, as depth charges tend to be in War Thunder. Next is Survivability. The Akebono has no notable hull armor, however it has a pretty good crew count of 193. It's large enough to avoid being hull broken and soak up some damage, though most full destroyers are still much more survivable than it. Last for the Akebono's stats comes mobility. The top speed is 52 km per hour, and the mobility otherwise is a bit subpar. It's not terrible, but it's certainly not getting anywhere fast. Overall, the Akebono is a pretty strong vessel. The firepower in particular is excellent, making it an incredible PT boat clever and a legitimate contender for many destroyers. At close ranges it can beat some destroyers in damage output, and it's survivable enough to tank a few salvos from most vessels. It's important to aim for the turrets of enemy destroyers and knock those out, as the fast fire rate of the 3-inch 50 caliber cannon can make it easy to disarm enemy destroyers so long as you can hit the turrets. I'd recommend finding a key to ranging shot and using that to fire, as staggering the shells makes it a bit easier to hit small targets such as PT boats and aircraft. The biggest weakness of the Akebono would be certain destroyers such as the Fletcher that are notably resistant to high explosive damage, since it doesn't have an effective form of armor-piercing ammunition without sacrificing almost all its damage per shot. As for whether or not the Akebono is worth it, I would easily say yes. It's relatively cheap for what it is at just under 3,000 Golden Eagles. It's not much more expensive than a PGO2, but is at a lower VR, much easier to use, and has higher reward modifiers. It can even grind Silver Lions at a surprisingly high rate, and due to its very generous VR, is a very good introduction to naval battles for someone who wants to skip the smaller vessels with a premium. I would give it my full recommendation, both for fun factor and for grinding. The Akebono comes with all its modifications unlocked, along with a talisman. It can grind up to Tier 3 vessels, but more notably can grind out the very expensive Tier 2 vessels such as the Chikugo and Isuzu. It also fits very well into Japan's 3.3 lineup with the Type 11, Ikazuchi, and Chikugo. For crew skills, take leadership, crew interchangeability, fire prevention, and ship control. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more naval content.